Nobody is talking about what happens when the thermometer stops being a number and starts being a sentence, a death sentence, a slow one, the kind that doesn't announce itself with sirens or storm warnings. It just arrives, and it stays. We are not in a heat wave. We are inside the opening chapter of something that the models have been quietly screaming about for the last 6 days, and most people are going about their Thursday like it's ordinary. It isn't. By the time you finish watching this, the map is going to look completely different to you. Not because I'm going to exaggerate, but because I'm going to show you exactly what's actually there. Let's start where most forecasters aren't starting. They're talking about the storms, and yes, the storms matter. They matter a lot. But the storms are the thing your eye goes to because it moves, because it spins, because it shows up on radar in a way that feels urgent and dramatic. The real story is the thing that isn't moving at all. It's sitting, pressing down, building. And it's been there all week, and it's going to be there next week, and the week after that if the models hold. And right now they're holding. That's the heat dome. And it's not done. Here's what you need to understand before we walk through this day by day. A heat dome is not a heat wave. A heat wave is temporary. A heat dome is structural. It's a ridge of high pressure aloft that essentially acts like a lid on a pressure cooker, trapping hot air beneath it and forcing it to sink, compress, and superheat. Every time air sinks under that dome, it warms. Every time it tries to escape, the dome pushes it back down, and the longer the dome sits, the hotter the layer beneath it gets. It's a feedback loop, and right now, that loop is running at near record intensity across the desert southwest and building eastward. Friday is where this begins to show its teeth. Storms fire first. Before most of the country is thinking about severe weather, the atmosphere is already loaded across Iowa and Missouri. 11 million people wake up Friday inside a marginal risk zone that stretches from the Iowa border down through the Ozarks, and there's a second zone sitting over the central and southern high plains that isn't getting nearly enough attention. This is not a sprawling outbreak. This is a focused, conditional setup. And that word, conditional, is doing a lot of work here. It means the ingredients are there. It means the environment is primed. What it doesn't tell you is which storms tap into that environment first and hold together long enough to become dangerous. That's the part nobody can fully answer on Thursday. But here's what we know. A wave of energy slides in while a surface low deepens from central Iowa into southern Illinois Friday night. Dew points in the low to mid-70s. Storm fuel in the range of 1,000 to 2,500 units of instability energy. That's not catastrophic. That's enough. Warm air aloft is going to melt most of the hail before it ever reaches the ground, which means the threat isn't golf balls falling from the sky. The threat is what you can't see coming as fast. Damaging winds, clustering storms that move together and hit wide swaths of territory at the same time. And then there's the part that the short-range models are quietly flagging. And I don't want to understate this because the tendency in these setups is to say the tornado risk is low, so it probably won't happen. That's the wrong way to think about it. The right way to think about it is this. Low-level wind shear arrives late Friday afternoon into the evening across East Missouri. If a supercell can hold its rotating updraft together near St. Louis or Columbia, you have a legitimate tornado window between 3 in the afternoon and 9 at night. That window is specific. It's not everywhere. It's not all day. It's that corridor, that time frame, and any storm that can survive long enough to tap into that shear structure. The place I keep coming back to is Springfield, Columbia, St. Louis. If you have plans in those cities Friday evening, you need a plan B that you've already thought through before you get there, not when the warning hits, before. There's also a flood angle that's easy to miss when you're focused on rotation and wind speeds. The moisture overhead is sitting in the 99th percentile for late July. These storms are going to move fast, which usually limits widespread flooding. But fast-moving storms that drop 3 to 4 inches over a single town don't care about the averages. The unlucky communities in the path are going to see roads go under. That's not speculation. That's moisture content plus instability, plus a surface low that deepens as it moves east. The math is straightforward. Out west, Friday tells a completely different story with the same underlying engine. Upslope flow behind the front fires supercells over Colorado with shear capable of producing golf ball-sized hail and wind gusts between 60 and 70 miles per hour. Denver and Pueblo are in that zone. It's a low-end, scattered severe day on paper, which is exactly how these things look before they happen. And then there's the heat. This is where the forecast stops being a weather briefing and starts being something more serious. A heat index between 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit across the south on Friday is the opening act. Actual air temperatures in the mid to upper 90s to low hundreds across the southern plains. The kind of afternoon where a parked car reaches lethal interior temperatures in minutes, not hours. The kind of afternoon where the ambient air outside is warm enough to overwhelm the body's cooling systems in people who are older, younger, or already fighting something else. This isn't dramatic language, this is physiology. The human body can handle heat up to a point. And that point varies by person, by hydration status, by whether or not they have access to air conditioning, by whether or not anyone checks on them. But the heat across the south on Friday is not the main event. It's context for what's happening further west. Phoenix is heading for 115 degrees with a realistic shot at 117 or 118. That's not a prediction dressed up as a possibility. The models have been consistent. The setup is there. Phoenix's all-time August record is 118 degrees, and this weekend that record is being genuinely threatened. Not flirted with, threatened. Las Vegas is closing in on its all-time daily heat records. And Death Valley, which is the hottest, reliably measured place on Earth's surface, is looking at 127 degrees Fahrenheit. Let that settle for a moment. 127 degrees. In a valley where the rock walls radiate stored heat back at you through the night. And that brings us to the detail that doesn't get enough attention in heat coverage, and it's the one that actually determines whether people survive or don't. The overnight lows. The Mojave Desert may not drop below 90 degrees Friday night. 90 degrees overnight, that's not a low temperature. That's a baseline that your body never recovers from. Heat stress is cumulative. Your core temperature rises during the day, and the night is supposed to be the reset, the period where the body catches up, where heat is released, where systems stabilize. Take that away for one night, you're uncomfortable. Take it away for 3 nights in a row, you're in a medical situation, whether you know it or not. Take it away for a week, which is where we're headed in the desert southwest, and the mortality risk stops being theoretical and starts showing up in emergency rooms. Record warm overnight lows are expected. Multiple nights in a row, that's the mechanism that turns a heat event into a heat disaster. And it's the mechanism that's least visible on a weather map, because maps show highs, not lows, not the absence of relief, not the sustained suffering of a body that never gets to cool down. Check on your neighbors, the ones who are older, the ones who live alone, the ones you haven't heard from in a few days. Drink water before you're thirsty, because by the time thirst registers, you're already behind. And the car thing isn't a reminder for most people, it's a reflex they think they have, but don't actually apply consistently, not even for a minute. The interior of a car in a Phoenix parking lot in August is a different physical environment than anywhere else you'll encounter in daily life. It is deadly in a time frame that doesn't allow for second chances. Saturday shifts the geography of the threat eastward. The central system that fired over the Midwest swings into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, and now Nashville, Louisville, Lexington, Cincinnati, and Huntsville are all in the same weather conversation. 14.3 million people under a marginal risk. Damaging wind is the headline hazard as the atmosphere feeds instability into a soupy, warm air mass that's had time to build moisture overnight. There's low-end tornado potential from Indiana into Middle Tennessee, but wind shear is weak enough that I expect what we'll see is messy storm clusters and brief spin-ups rather than long-track organized supercells. The tornado threat is there. It's not the lead story. The lead story is water. Storms Saturday are going to train, which is a term that sounds technical and becomes real when you understand what it means. Training storms are storms that follow the same path one after another, like cars on a highway, each one dropping rain over the same geography the previous one just hit. Southwestern to northeastern movement along a slow front means that certain towns in Middle Tennessee and Kentucky are going to receive rainfall totals from multiple storm cells in sequence. This is the setup for flash flooding, not because any single storm is catastrophically large, but because the ground never gets a chance to drain between events. Slight risk of excessive rainfall, but that's a risk level that still produces serious water rises in the wrong places. If you're in Nashville or Louisville on Saturday, the radar needs to be open and it needs to be live, not checked once before you leave. Live. Now here's something the map is actually giving us this weekend that gets buried under all the severe weather discussion. The best weather in the entire country. Saturday is sitting over the Dakotas and western Minnesota. Fargo, Aberdeen, Brookings, St. Cloud. Mid-80s, dew points near 58, almost no cloud cover and no rain chance at all. A fresh, dry air mass that scoured out the humidity behind Friday's front is creating a day that objectively scores near the top of what late July can offer in the northern tier. Lake weather, grill weather. The kind of afternoon that makes you feel like the whole country isn't on fire and underwater, even when it is. Enjoy it deliberately. It won't last. By Sunday, the heat is already advancing from the west, and by the time we reach the middle of next week, much of this region is going to be looking at triple-digit temperatures as the dome reloads. That reloading is the part of this forecast I want you to hold on to because it changes the frame of everything we're looking at. Sunday's rain map stretches from the Gulf Coast all the way up into the Northeast, which sounds like a big, sprawling system, and it is. But the spot on that map that I'm watching most carefully isn't in the south where the moisture originates, and it isn't in the mid-Atlantic where these systems tend to spread and thin out. It's upstate New York and Vermont. Albany recently set an all-time daily rainfall record. The ground up there is still saturated, and saturated ground doesn't behave the way dry ground does when rain arrives. Water that would normally infiltrate and slow down instead runs off immediately, finding the path of least resistance, which is the creek, the stream, the low road, the culvert that was designed for normal conditions and not for consecutive saturated rain events. 1 to 2 inches of additional rainfall on that kind of soil can produce creek rises and road flooding that look disproportionate to how much rain actually fell. That's the physics. That's what makes upstate New York the watch point Sunday, regardless of how unspectacular the rainfall totals might look on the map. Out west Sunday, a strong system pushing into southwestern Canada finally breaks the northwestern heat. But before it does, it whips up critical fire weather conditions across Montana and the northern Rockies. Gusty winds, dry conditions. Terrain that has been baking under elevated temperatures for weeks. This is not a small concern in fire weather terms. The clearing comes eventually, and the timing actually works for Seattle's Seafair weekend, with conditions setting up to be far more comfortable than what the interior west is experiencing. Blue Angels over Lake Washington under clearing skies. That's the reward for getting through a week of heat and uncertainty in the northwest. Monday is the day I'd circle if I was telling you to watch one day in the extended range. A fresh disturbance and a strengthening jet stream dig into the northern plains and set up what could be the most significant severe weather day of the entire extended period, focused on the upper Mississippi Valley along the cold front. That's the highest signal I'm seeing anywhere beyond Friday. Confidence is weak to moderate at 5 days out, because confidence is always constrained by time at that range, and the wild card here is timing. If the front sweeps through overnight, the storm fuel fades before anything can organize into a meaningful threat. If it happens during the day, the daytime instability gets involved, and that changes the outcome significantly. Right now, I can't tell you which version we get. But I can tell you that the atmospheric setup looks right for the daytime version, and if it verifies, this could be a day that the northern plains talks about for a while. Behind that front, real relief arrives in the Dakotas. Temperatures that have been running near 100 drop into the 70s. That spread represents relief that is both physically meaningful and psychologically significant for people who've been managing through days of oppressive heat without a break. Tuesday through Thursday of the following week is where the picture gets legitimately complicated, and I'm going to be honest with you about the limits of what I can say with confidence at this range. There are possible severe storms over the central high plains Tuesday, and there's a renewed flash flood threat over Colorado's burn scars that deserves more attention than it's getting. Burn scar hydrology is one of the most underappreciated hazards in weather forecasting. When fire removes vegetation and alters the soil structure, the resulting landscape sheds water dramatically faster than undamaged terrain. You don't need a catastrophic rainfall event to trigger dangerous flash flooding over a burn scar. You need a moderate one. And Colorado has burn scars in areas that are also under active heat dome influence, which means the combination of intermittent heavy monsoonal rain and compromised terrain is an ongoing threat that doesn't require a particular setup to produce damaging outcomes. The models diverge by Wednesday and Thursday on where the disturbances track, which means I'm not going to manufacture confidence I don't have. There are forecasters who will give you a definitive extended range story at this lead time. The ones who've been doing this long enough learn that the cost of false confidence in extended range forecasting is that people stop calibrating their expectations appropriately. When the prediction changes, which it will, they feel misled. I'd rather tell you where the signal is strong and where it isn't, and Wednesday through Thursday right now is a range where the signal is fractured enough that the honest answer is check back. What I will tell you with total confidence is the heat. California, Utah, Arizona, triple digits that refuse to let go through the middle of next week. That is not going to change, regardless of how the disturbances track. The dome is not moving, it's going to reload. And that's the word I want to land on as we look toward August 6th through the 12th. Because reload is not a metaphor here, it's a mechanism. The western ridge re-strengthens going into week 2. The heat dome builds again with elevated intensity, particularly focused on California, the Great Basin, and the nearby Rockies. High risk of extreme heat on August 6th and 7th, moderate risk across much of the west through the 8th. I expect records to fall on both ends, daytime highs and overnight lows, and I expect the heat to then spread east toward the plains and southeast through the remainder of that week. This is not a 7-day event followed by recovery. This is a layered, sustained pattern where the first pulse sets the stage, the dome partially weakens, and then it reloads with the next ridge. The reload is where the records get set. The reload is where infrastructure under thermal stress for weeks begins to show it. The reload is where the cumulative toll becomes visible. Simultaneously, moisture surging along the Gulf of California continues driving heavy monsoonal rainfall into the desert southwest. The rainfall is net positive for drought conditions in some areas. But over burn scars, where the soil can't absorb what falls on it, that same moisture produces rapid runoff events. Debris flows. Flash floods that move faster than people expect. because they've heard the term before and it doesn't sound like what it actually is. A debris flow in a burn scar drainage can travel at speeds that outpace a sprint. It carries material that doesn't behave like water. It doesn't stop when the rain stops. And then there's the combination I find most concerning as we look beyond the immediate heat and storm threats. The dry pattern consolidating over the Great Plains and mid-Mississippi Valley under the influence of that same heat dome. The Great Lakes region is at risk for rapid onset drought. The Dakotas are already trending that direction. Rapid onset drought is exactly what it sounds like. The kind that develops in weeks rather than months because the heat dome is simultaneously baking the soil, suppressing rainfall, and increasing evapotranspiration to the point where the land cannot hold moisture. Agriculture, water supply, wildfire risk, all of these move together in a rapid onset drought scenario. And the timeline is short enough that the August window we're looking at may be when the signal first becomes clear in the data. Here's the thing about this kind of atmospheric pattern that's hard to convey through a day-by-day breakdown. The individual events matter. The storms on Friday matter. The flooding in Kentucky on Saturday matters. The overnight lows in the Mojave matter. But the event you should be watching isn't any single storm or any single heat peak. It's the pattern. It's the persistence. It's the fact that the ridge keeps reforming, that the moisture channel keeps feeding, that the dome keeps reloading, that the drought signal keeps building. Individual events have boundaries. They start, they move, they weaken, they end. Patterns don't end on schedule. What we are watching right now is not a bad week of weather. It is an atmospheric regime that has settled into a configuration that favors repeated extreme events across multiple hazard categories simultaneously. Sustained heat in the west, severe weather in the transitional zone, flooding in the saturated east, fire weather in the mountain west, and a creeping drought signal in the agricultural heartland. These are not separate stories. They are the same story being told in different languages by different parts of the same atmospheric system. 115 degrees in the desert southwest, not for an afternoon, but through multiple cycles of heating and inadequate cooling. Overnight temperatures in the 90s in locations that humans have built lives and infrastructure around the assumption of nighttime relief. Storms firing in corridors where the combination of instability and shear creates windows for organized, severe weather that shift by hours in ways that can mean the difference between a tornado warning and a clear evening. Something is building. The models are showing it. The pattern is showing it. And the question that nobody has a clean answer to right now is not whether the heat dome reloads. It's what changes when it does. Whether the disturbances that are supposed to break the pattern from the north come through on schedule, whether the monsoonal moisture continues to moderate the worst of the southwestern heat, whether the drought signal in the plains accelerates or stabilizes. These are the variables still in play. The atmosphere doesn't owe you a simple answer, and right now it isn't giving one. What it is giving you is a map that's doing something, a pattern that's saying something, and a window of time between now and the middle of August where the variables are still moving, where what comes next isn't written yet, where the difference between a historic heat event and a catastrophic one might come down to whether the dome reloads at the same intensity or slightly higher, or whether a well-timed disturbance clips the ridge before it locks in. That's the part nobody can tell you with certainty today. Not because the models are failing, because this is what the edge of predictability actually looks like. Not chaos, not randomness. A very large, very real thing sitting just beyond the horizon of confident language. Close enough to see its shape, far enough that the details are still forming. It's coming. The shape is already there. And the next few days are going to tell us exactly what it becomes.